Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in, this podcast is about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is the Honorable Judge Julie Field. In 2021, Judge Field retired from the trial court bench in Colorado after almost 11 years in order to become a co-founder of Consilium Institute and founder of J Field Mediation. Judge Field is the host of the podcast Think Boldly. Prior to her appointment to the bench, Judge Field was a law professor at the University of Michigan, Washburn Law School, and the University of Denver. At the University of Michigan, she co-founded the Women and Law Clinic, which handled nationally significant cases regarding employment discrimination, family law, and reproductive rights. Judge Julie, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Will. Thank you so much for having me on and giving me the opportunity to talk to people who are dealing with navigating dating in this world where there's often kids on both sides.
Yeah, and so Judge Field, what was that aha moment that made you leave the court to help people? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah. So, what I discovered having done family law for the many decades that I've done it, both as a law professor, as a private practitioner, and as a judge, is that the legal system really pits people against each other, right? It creates adversaries rather than teammates. And so, even though they may have different roles, in most cases, generally, and hopefully, they both have the same desire to raise healthy, happy, resilient children, but they're operating out of different houses, they're operating from different mindsets, and that can make it really challenging for folks. And as a judge, there were things that I could do and things that I couldn't do. My goal as a judge was always to help families become self-governing after divorce, to give them the tools in my court orders that would allow them to make decisions for their families and themselves going forward without needing a court. And a court should really be involved in very limited ways. But I saw lots of families come back again and again and again. And when I was approached by my friend and former colleague Heidi Webb, she told me about this great insight that she had, the Consilium process that she created, which really looks at who are the families before divorce and then who are the families after divorce and what do they need and how can they restructure their families after divorce, because that's really what we're doing
Yeah.
when a family is going through a divorce. We're not destroying the family, although a lot of people talk about divorce as destruction. We're changing the character of it, and we're giving a child two homes, and having to parents after divorce can be very challenging. And I'm sure, as many of your listeners know, it becomes even more challenging when you bring other people into the mix.
Yeah, I can imagine. I wanted to just tell you a brief story because I grew up with my grandparents, right? And when my father and mother divorced in the mid 70s, it was, like I said, I was lucky that I grew up with my grandparents. I really was. I never saw it that way at the beginning.
Mhm.
I felt left out, but as I got older, I realized I was lucky because of the dynamic of the family and my family, how fractured it was. My brother went with my father, and my sisters went with my mother. So I got there was five of us at the time. So it was so there's five of us just pretty much fractured. Rarely any contact or anything like that. Now that we're older, we call each other and, I
Nice.
visit them. So, like, if I'm in the city, I live in New York, I visit one sister, I stay with her. I visit the other sister, I stay with her. So, our contact has gotten so much better over the years. But I just felt so out of place at the beginning of my life when I was, 12, 10, 11,
Mhm.
12.
Mhm.
Um, and I know you've been, after decades of, trial court in the, on the bench, you co-founded Consilium Institute to help the families out. How would that my situation, if you face that, how would
Hmm.
that come to play, in your, let's say, study, or for lack of a better phrase,
Right.
help the family, if that
Yeah.
makes sense at all.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because every family is different. Every
Right.
family is unique, right? Every family has their own story and history and goals and desires for outcomes for the kids.
Mhm.
But generally speaking, most parents want their kids to be happy, healthy, successful, loved, resilient, right? They want all of these things for their kids. They're navigating how to get there and how to get to that place. What we do at the Consilium Institute is we bring together the professionals who are specially trained and best situated to help bring those families together. Um, Attorneys, specially trained judges, financial professionals, and
Mhm.
therapists who are looking not just at what is the break, but what does the future look like? And really helping people identify what that future is going to look like for the kids and using a child centered, a
Yeah.
child focused perspective, and building that team of professionals, but that team of support for the children. So in your situation, I mean, I don't know how it sounds like there was a lot of estrangement
Yes.
um, and distance between your parents and your grandparents and your siblings that could have, if that had come before my court,
Sure.
I would have put in place tools to help the family deal with that,
Mhm.
and that could be, it could be therapy, it could be, having family meetings, it could be continuing to have some oversight until the family became self-governing. I mean,
Right.
you were self-governing in a way, just not
Right.
in a way that gave you as much connection and security as you may have wanted with your parents and your siblings during the time.
Yeah.
So like I said, every family is different, but I think there's some commonalities. I think there is doing what we can as courts and professionals and people in kids' lives to expand the love rather than contract it, and to recognize that more people in a child's life is generally better.
Mhm.
To identify and communicate about what those key issues are that you can agree on. We agree that our kids should grow up to be successful and educated and reliant and empathic and all of the things that we want for our kids. So one of the things that we do at the Consilium Institute is look at who is the family,
Mhm.
what is their history individually and collectively. So each person, we have the attorneys examine each person, like generally not doing a deep dive, but
Right. Right.
really figuring out what their background is, what their family of origin is. So how does that build their expectation of what the family will look like? And encouraging the common goals of having those successful, productive kids,
Yeah.
and what are their own goals as individuals after the divorce. So this is I mean, we talk about restructuring a family, right? Not
Yeah.
destroying it. And just using that word helps people put it in a different context, I think, right? That it's looking different, but it's still a family. It's just a different configuration of what a
Right.
family is. And you still had a family.
Yeah.
It just looked very different and was in different places with different adults.
No, 100%. And I want to talk more about restructuring. So what does that entail? What does that really mean? Because for
Hmm.
me, Judge Julie, I think we took it upon ourselves, the siblings, to try to keep in contact with each other. And
Hmm.
more so after our parents' death. my grandparents, my grandfather died, I think, in 1986. I was in my early 20s.
Mhm.
And then my mom and dad, they passed away like in the mid 2000s.
Okay.
But from that point on, we always try to keep in contact with each other, and we had our differences, but over the last, I say, year and a half, it's really, you know,
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
I guess molded together, if that, for lack of a better phrase. So
Hmm.
if you could talk more about restructuring, because I think that's so important, because sometimes I see siblings don't talk to each other anymore, and
Right.
I've gone through that. So I don't want to make this about me, because I want to talk more about your practice and all that. So if you could talk more about restructuring.
Yeah, restructuring really is envisioning that things are different, right? If we think about a business that goes through bankruptcy, right? There's two things that a corporation can do when it goes through bankruptcy. It can dissolve and be destroyed and never exist again, or it can be structured in a different way. And so, what we look at when we look at families that are separating and divorcing is that they're just changing their configuration. They're structuring their things in a different way. So the family hasn't disappeared, it's just changed. And it really just changing that phrasing from destruction to restructuring, it helps to shift the thinking of what's important to the parents and to the children. It helps put everyone in a more positive mindset. And, some of the different phrases that we use in Consilium include things like we don't talk about mom's house and dad's house. We talk about the child's home with mom, the child's home with dad, because if you talk about mom's house and dad's house, the child has no home. They're homeless. And so just shifting that perception and mindset can help the adults who are involved in the children's lives to think differently about what is it that the children need.
Wow. I never thought about it, about how you said it. Uh, Mom's home, dad's home, and then all of a sudden the kids are like, wait a minute, where do I fit in that? Am I in the ballpark and thinking that? Because
Yep,
that's
yeah.
that's how I felt.
Yeah.
Like I said, I grew up with my grandparents, and I was lucky. But again, Judge Julie, I didn't think of it that way when I'm 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. You
Right. Not maybe not consciously,
right.
but right. And then it becomes even more complicated if there are step parents involved, right?
Hmm. Yes,
Uh,
I gotcha.
right. And
Yeah.
then, oh, that's dad and Sarah's home. That's mom and, Stuart's home, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So that becomes even more complicated.
So how does the role of a family, when they're restructuring covenants, how does that, again, how do we work that as a family?
Right. Well, at Consilium, we created what's called a restructuring covenant. A
Okay.
restructuring covenant is not a court order. It's a commitment and a promise between the parents. It's a blessing. That's why we call it a covenant, because it's centered around the children and their needs, and it's child focused, relationship centered, and it helps the parents focus on communication, connection, compassion, and care. It really is a one of a kind tool that that families can put in place when they need to identify shared visions for their children and to deal with changes and challenges as they come,
Yeah.
including new partners and dating relationships and things like that. It can be created by the parents alone or with the assistance of a mediator, or an attorney or a therapist. And it's an individualized document. It's an individualized promise
Hmm.
to the other. But it always starts with identifying the common goals that each parent has for their children. Most parents we find can agree on these things, right? They, like we talked about, you want them to be successful. You want them to be, to have good partners when they grow up. You want them to be thoughtful, caring people. We want them to find a great vocation that nurtures them. So those, once you start with those common goals, that helps to build everything else out. And it doesn't just focus on, these aspirational goals. It really puts into place how you're going to get there together as a team
Mhm.
for your children. So understanding it can include things like understanding and specifying clear expectations around parenting time schedules and holidays and how to honor those if there's a change. Something that may or may not end up in a court order, but is better handled with the parents and the family being self-governing, right? It helps to address issues that are important to the children and their parent, but not appropriate for a court decision. Like, are there holiday rituals that you want to continue? We always had a Christmas tree in our house, but even though we're Jewish, are we going to do that in, the new house with mom, right? What is that going to look like? How will the family connections, including grandparents, including siblings, be respected and cultivated? So it can get to that granular level. And it can really set a roadmap. That's really what it does. It sets the roadmap for healthy long-term collaboration, but it's based on communication and centering the child and the children at the heart of everything that you think about and do.
Oh wow! It's funny. We don't think about terms like that, or think about how the kids, especially, right? How do we protect the kids, especially from
Right.
being pulled to the left, to the right?
Yeah.
We're putting them in the middle. And one story I got, to Julie, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, he took custody of both of his sons
Mm-hmm.
at an early age. I think they
Okay.
were maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever
Yeah.
the ages were. A few years later, when they were still maybe about to reach a teenager, his ex-wife came back and wanted just to take one of them. And
Mm.
I said, "Listen, I don't have kids, so I can't, I don't have any say so, but you can't break them up." That's what I said.
Mm-hmm.
As a friend, I'm like, because
Right.
that's not fair. So again, so these kids were put in the middle. How do we protect the
Mhm.
kids from being pulled from two angles?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think a lot of times what the parents are looking at is what they need and projecting that on to what
Mhm.
they think the children need, right? I mean, but I do think at heart, parents generally want to do what's best for their children, but sometimes they can lose sight of the fact that things are necessarily changing in the children's experiences, right? It. I mean, it's unsettling, right? When we think about what we ask of kids in divorce cases, I wonder how many of your listeners would volunteer to live 3 days in one house and 4 days in another,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But we expect kids to do that and to do it, cheerfully and without complaint and without resentment. So I think if we help parents place themselves back in that place, just that foundational place, of saying, it is what we're expecting necessary, appropriate, really coming from the perspective of what the children need, or is it more that it's my convenience,
Mhm.
um, or my interest, right? And sometimes you need to bring professionals in to assist with navigating that, and that is a great place for both the restructuring covenant and for a highly trained attorney, mediator, therapist to get involved to help navigate those things and to remember that, the kids, that communication is primary. Things have changed. Maybe when you were living in the same house, you assumed certain things or certain duties, or you thought, well, mom's always going to do this or dad's always going to do that. That's changed. So you need to have those honest, intentional, and a lot of times periodic conversations around what's going on. And in the case of your friend, that might have been a good place. If that had come before me as a judge, I
Yeah.
probably would have ordered some opportunity for the children to have a voice with the court. Now, that doesn't mean that each parent should, tell them what to say, but there are different methods that I can use as a judge, including sitting down and coloring with a kid in my office and asking them questions and hearing what they really think.
Yeah.
Um, so that using those tools and recognizing that the children should have a voice as well.
Yeah, when my friend told me about that, like I said, I made sure that I said, listen, I don't have kids, so I don't know what you're going through, but again, you can't break them up. They've been together, since, whatever, let's say I think they're 1 or 2 years apart. So they've been together for 8, 10, 12 years. So anyway, um, in the realms of dating, uh,
Yeah.
what's crazy now, what I see in terms of dating in, let's say, modern dating,
Hmm.
um, men are being told not to date single mothers. They say there's no benefit for them. Why date? And when I was younger, I dated single mothers, and that didn't bother me one bit. The only thing was,
Sure.
how can we work the schedule? So how do you co-parent, right, when it comes to
Right.
dating now? If
Yeah.
let's say if both parents are alive and they're in,
Hmm.
in in the kid's life, so I'm the third, let's say the third party. I want to date this young lady, but she has a kid, but does the father wants to take control, at least take care of the kids for the night? How does co-parenting come into dating?
Right, right. Well, I think it goes back to that communication and partnership, right?
Yeah.
And the restructuring covenant can be a great place to pre-game those questions before
Mm.
they become imminent problems, right? So at the time that someone is divorcing, or if they're reviewing their custody arrangements or whatever, thinking about and setting out the specifics of dating, remarriage, and blending a family and getting that bonus family, right? And thinking
Mhm.
about it as you're broadening the love. So you're getting a bonus family. Those can be individualized within the covenant. And you know what? Two things there, this reminds me a little bit, Will, of a couple things that I would tell parents from the bench
Mhm.
when I was on the court is that kids benefit from having more people who love them rather than fewer. And so, as parents, you should, where you can, where it's safe to do so, embrace that, right? And conflict between the parents, the co parents, necessarily hurts the children. So, just having that conflict can be impactful. Now, conflict is obviously unavoidable in times where there's safety concerns or things like that, um, and you need to address those, and that often is a place where only the court can really address those. But really trying to keep that focus on who are the kids, what do they need, and what are we asking them to do as
Mhm.
parents. We're asking them to spend 3 nights in one house and 4 nights in another. Gosh, wouldn't that be awful?
Yeah, I wouldn't like it.
Yeah, nobody would. Nobody would.
I wouldn't have a home. I'm like, where's my home? Where? Well, let me let you know, because I don't know what days I'm going to spend over here and over there.
Right. Where's my stuff? And right.
Yeah. So after a
Right.
divorce, what's this? The thriving
Mhm.
of both parents. What does that look like after a divorce, though? Did my question make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, really thinking about what is it that people want when the
Yeah.
divorce is done, right?
Yeah.
Because the divorce case itself is just a blip, really, when you
Mm.
think about it, right? Or it should be.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes on and on and on, but it should
Yeah.
just be a very short, year long, if that, or maybe 2 years, right, process,
Yeah.
and then it's done. But as looking particularly at the parenting issues, parents who I think put together a plan that focuses on who the children are, what they need to feel safe and secure That's a great starting place.
Mhm.
And recognize that kids change and kids grow and things change and they will have different needs. And maybe even in the example of your friend, maybe the kids would have benefited from being in separate places for a while, right? Or for some period of time, or having some one-on-one parent time with one parent or the other. So there are different ways to configure it, and it is dynamic. It changes over time, right? So building in communication on a regular basis where the topic is the kids, keeping that parent level communication and not involving the kids and saying, well, what do you want to do? Or where do you want to go? But making sure that you are um, looking at it from above and figuring out what makes sense for what they need based on who they are. Making sure that you, if you're the parent,
Mhm.
have put together that team of attorneys, therapists, financial professionals who can help you navigate that and ease that path and create that path and ease that path for your children. And remember, you're on the same team. You really are. You have the same
Yeah.
goal. Everybody, I have yet to have a parent that says, no, I want my child to, live on the streets and, or end up in prison or nobody says that.
Right, right.
Everybody wants the positive outcome.
Yeah.
And so starting from that premise and moving forward and saying, is what we're doing today, not talking to each other, is that helping that? No, probably not. Is having an honest, if hard communication with the assistance of a trained professional,
Sure.
something that is going to help the children down the line? Absolutely. So do that. Take take the put on your grown-up pants and, and be the parent.
Yeah, no, I first of all, Judge Julie, I could probably talk to you for another hour because this is a fascinating topic. This is the first time I ever talked about this, so I really appreciate that. And before I let you go, anything else you want to promote? Your podcast, Consilium, anything
Yeah,
you want to add?
we've got attorneys and financial professionals and therapists who are trained in the Consilium process, who focus on restructuring covenants, who focus on that future focus with kids and families and finances. You can find us at consiliuminstitute.com. We have the Thinking Boldly podcast where we bring in experts, much like you do, Will,
Yeah.
every couple of weeks to talk with our listeners. I have a book coming out this year called When I Do Becomes I Don't, a judge's perspective on divorce and family law. My partner is putting together a book of, she is a prolific blogger and she that address all family issues of
Sure.
all kinds. So she's putting that together. That will be out this year. And I just started a Substack called Judge Julie's Musings, where I
Oh, okay.
reflect on my experience as a judge. So lots happening at Consilium
Keeping you
Institute.
busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Consiliuminstitute.com.
Sounds good. And before I let you go, one last word about parenting, kids. What can we, strive for?
Um, Remembering that you're on the same team, but you have different positions, right?
Mm.
If there were two quarterbacks on a football team playing on the field at the same time, the
Right,
game doesn't work,
right,
right?
right, right. Yeah.
So remember that you can be on the same team and have different roles. And that's what is going to lead to success and a winning outcome for your family.
No, sounds good. Well, first of all, again, Judge Julie, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on People on Dating. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, my pleasure. Bye bye.